Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very, very special Nova Scotia broadcast. And I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to have a couple of young ladies that were heavily involved in Canada over the last couple of months. They were, in fact, the winners of the BBC series Race Across the World. And they are Cathie and they are Tricia, and they are on the other end of this line. Good afternoon, ladies.
Good afternoon, Graham. Thank you for having us.
No problem at all. You must be pinching yourself that the fact that A, you've had the opportunity to do it, but secondly, seemingly against all the odds, you came and won the whole competition.
Yes. We kept you all guessing, didn't we?
Yeah, did indeed. But it must be down to your charm that you were allowed to get all these lifts and jobs and all these types of things that went on.
I think it was teamwork. It was definitely teamwork as well, yeah. And the people in Canada and the generosity of the Canadians. That kind of it was an amalgamation of the whole lot, wasn't it?
Yeah,
teamwork. The fact that we've got this charisma coming out of us,
yeah,
and the Canadians.
I can feel it oozing across the screen. Now, how far? I mean, I know you would have applied to get on the competition. How far in advance were you told that you were going to Canada?
We didn't actually know we were going to Canada until about 3 hours before the flight.
Excellent.
So just before we left the hotel for the airport terminal, we were then told we were flying to Vancouver. So,
and at that stage, had either of you been to Canada before? Did you have a preconception of what Canada was like?
I've never been to Canada ever. It's somewhere that I've always really wanted to go to because I've been to America and I wanted to see kind of the Canadian side of it because everybody goes like, oh, American, and then the Americans go, oh, the Canadians, and I always wanted to see the other side of it, but never had the opportunity. So I was really excited about going. Really excited.
My husband was born in Toronto, although came back to the UK when he was 7. So we've been out there twice visiting family, but literally only the Greater Toronto area. So I had no knowledge of other areas of Canada. Obviously, I knew of their existence, but I had no experience of them. And I knew that the Canadians are naturally very generous, very friendly, quite chilled. So I knew that already, but nothing could prepare me for the lengths of their generosity. That was mind-blowing.
It's a similar experience for most people that go to Canada. But one of the things I was going to talk about is that a key part, the key period from what I saw when I was watching the program was the province of Nova Scotia, which is when it all changed.
Yeah.
And the friendliness that you were shown in Nova Scotia, and indeed the other couples with homestays and etc., etc., that seemed to me a key part of it. Is that your recollection of it?
Most definitely. You know, we went, people going out of their way to help us in Nova Scotia. You know, they were just, I mean, we got given so much food and so many lifts, and it wasn't a bother to anybody there, was it? They were like, yeah, just jump in the car.
even simple things. We got dropped off at a town, I can't remember the name of it now, but it is literally the border between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. And we had to cross the bridge to get from New Brunswick over to Nova Scotia. And I got chatting with a lady and she just finished work. She was a nurse and she'd just done a goodness knows how long shift. And we were just chatting with her and asked her, you know, how do we get, what's the best way to get across into Nova Scotia? And she said, oh, she said, jump in, I'll drive you across the bridge.
Yeah.
And she did, and she drove us literally across the bridge and then dropped us off at a gas station the other side.
And she was out of her way, wasn't she?
She was on her way home from a long shift at work, and just so generous, you know, really, really lovely people.
That's marvellous. You spoke briefly there about food. Did you, and I know you were on a very limited budget, but the bits I saw when you were given food or you earned food or you actually bought food, what was that like? Because when I've been there, it's been an interesting experience with the food.
But we lived off cream cheese and crackers that we bought ourselves, and the cream cheese is really lovely. Don't get me wrong, you know, the Canadian cream cheese is better than British cream cheese, but yeah, the food itself was really fresh, wasn't it?
I think we had a few opportunities throughout the whole of Canada where people were kind enough to buy lunch for us or you know, take us to a restaurant. And what Tricia said about the freshness is really key, particularly in the provinces near the sea.
Yeah.
And we got treated to a fresh halibut lunch. And it was just the best thing ever.
It was delicious.
Really fresh. Yeah. And of course, we tried the lobster.
Yes.
And you didn't like the lobster, but I loved it. It was incredible. And then the time we spent in Nova Scotia, luckily we spent some of that time at a lovely hotel.
Yeah.
Beautiful, wasn't it? It was incredible. The fish was so fresh.
And fresh and seasonal seems to be the key.
It's you know, it tastes all the much better because we had spent 8 weeks on cream cheese and crackers.
Yeah, yeah.
We were very pleased for it.
I think one of the other preconceptions that other people might have of Canada is you're going to come across wildlife and wildlife that you wouldn't normally find down the road in Cheltenham or wherever, you know, wherever you might be.
Oh, I don't know, there's some different wildlife there.
Yeah. Did you have any encounters that will, you know, that would stimulate memories for you?
Yeah. Well, I always thought that when you go to Canada that there'd be moose absolutely everywhere. Wherever you look, there'd be a moose. But there wasn't. We didn't see that many, did we? We saw a couple, a mum and a baby, didn't we, that crossed the road in front of us. But the amount of bears.
Yeah, that really surprised us, actually. We weren't expecting to see so many up close.
Yeah.
These are the black bears. And luckily, we didn't see any polar bears. I was quite pleased about that, I have to be honest.
So we saw an Arctic fox run across, those squeaky things. Oh, the gophers. There were loads of gophers. Yeah.
But we saw loads of, we saw elk, we saw loads of caribou.
Oh, the eagles. Oh my word. And they were so close. And they're huge. I didn't realise how big they were. Yeah. But yeah.
Seals, so many different. And bison. Of course, the bison or buffalo, they're the equivalent of our cows. So wherever you see cows in the UK, in Canada, you'd see bison. So
very good.
It was very odd to see that to begin with, and then you kind of got used to it. And then when you got back to the UK, we went, "That's a cow."
Cow. Oh yeah, so that's what bison is like. Okay, where we see cows, they have bison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it all makes for a change, and it all makes for a pleasant experience, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Key phase for me when I was watching it was when you got to Halifax, and Halifax obviously is the major gateway if you're coming internationally into Nova Scotia. What impression did you have of Halifax? Do you enjoy Halifax itself? It's got a lot of history, a lot of troop movements during the Second World War, still a huge port with fish and all sorts of things going on. What was your experience there?
Well, we went kayaking, didn't we, in Halifax? Or well, it was in Halifax.
Yeah.
And we went around the bay, and it was beautiful, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were very lucky. We got a guided tour on kayaks around the immediate Halifax Bay area, and so we learned a little bit about the history of the port, and that was fascinating. If a little rocky.
Little rocky. I'm sure the waves were about 5 foot high.
They were not.
Then they were about 5 inches, but I felt like they were 5 foot.
But it was lovely to do that. So if anybody gets the opportunity to do the kayak tour around the bay, that was fantastic. And the guides are superb.
Oh, she was so knowledgeable about everything, wasn't she? Yeah, we were asking all sorts of random questions. She knew everything about Halifax, so it was really lovely.
For me, what was very unexpected for me was the graveyard from the Titanic.
Oh yeah,
I wasn't expecting to see that, and that was really sad, emotional, but incredible to go and see.
Yeah, because there's some unnamed ones, I think there, aren't there?
Yeah, there are.
There's quite a few there, isn't there?
But it's the way they've done it is lovely. Very respectful.
Very respectful.
And I was really impressed with that. There's no great fanfare about it,
No.
but it's just a place where people can go and just pay their respects. And I was really impressed with that.
It's actually
Yeah.
giving me goosebumps thinking about it.
Yeah.
Respectful,
Yeah,
respectful but understated.
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I suppose is well, in my opinion, it's the right way to
Yeah.
do. You know, it's
Sure.
not. It's not kind of advertised as this massive tourist attraction.
No.
But
it's slightly off the beaten track, slightly.
Yeah.
But you know it's there. You know, if you ask anybody, they know it's there. But it's it's not flying everywhere and leafleted. And
we
stuff.
made a point of going there, didn't we? Because we really wanted to see it. But the town itself it had everything you could wish for.
And it's so clean and tidy as well, wasn't it?
The waterfront area, the boardwalk, was brilliant, and the opportunities to get out onto the water. You know, there's several of those, and seeing Halifax from the water is brilliant because you get a completely different perspective of it than walking through.
But apparently they do really, really nice ice creams there, but we didn't get to have one.
We didn't have enough money.
We very nearly got one. Very nearly.
What you did get in Nova Scotia, if I remember, was a rather large gin and tonic.
Not just one, maybe
we did.
A few more than that.
Well, they paid us in gin basically for cleaning the bats.
Yeah.
So I think that's fair.
I think it's fair.
I think it's more than fair. But the going for that, having that gin experience, but also I noticed that not just in Nova Scotia, but throughout Canada, in order to finance some of your taxi journeys, your ferries and so on, and food, was that you took part, little jobs for a day or two. That was one of them. But that's also part of the experience, isn't it? Actually being able to live almost like a local.
Yeah. And mixing in with the locals was, for us, it had to be done, because that's where you learn a lot. I mean, we got a lift right at the very start with a gentleman, and he was so full of all this information, wasn't he, Rob? And he was so full of information about the history and stuff like that. And we wouldn't have learnt that if we got on a bus, So, and then when we went through Nova Scotia, when we got the lift, again, we were getting the history of it, and getting into the locals and the local way of doing things was just really lovely.
Yeah, the distillery was a brilliant experience.
You got to drive a tractor.
I did get to drive a tractor, and they didn't show it.
No.
How rude.
Well, I think it's because I sat in the back going.
But it was brilliant distillery. Great place.
Stunning gin.
Very nice gin.
And they do shots as well, shots of vodka. So they do vodka bits as well. So
yeah,
they were
enjoyed
quite
that,
nice too.
didn't you?
Yeah.
Excellent. So it sounds like obviously a once in a lifetime experience. Very, very fortunate to get the opportunity to do what you did, and also be nicely rewarded for winning the whole thing. Would you go back?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And have you recommended it to friends and family?
Everybody.
Yeah. What
Very
I did
good.
find actually quite strange in Nova Scotia is all the English names that were there. There was like Bridgewater, Truro, Liverpool, and I couldn't understand why until we actually stayed in Liverpool, and they explained why they were named after the British places. And it's really, really interesting. So I tell everybody about it. You've got to go.
I'd actually love to go back to Liverpool, because our checkpoint was there. Our last checkpoint was there, and I'd love to go back to Liverpool. And that hotel, the name of which now I cannot remember, and we just walked, and of course we'd had weeks of being inland. And then we got to Liverpool, and the crashing of the waves from the Atlantic, it was just stunning.
Yeah, it was.
And we walked along, we went for a walk along the beach, and
a nice little stroll.
We just have a stroll, paddle in the sea, and we're walking, and it's a beautiful expanse of sand and beautiful. And the next minute we're out of breath
because we're going, come on, we're racing.
And Trisha's going, what are we doing?
A minute. So we had to walk back down again and remind ourselves to. But it was absolutely stunning, wasn't it?
And talking about a slow pace of life that you weren't in, actually, because you're always
Yeah.
clock watching. One of the things I noticed about the program was that it always seemed very open and not crowded, which is, I think, is an attribute that a lot of people go for these days, because lots of destinations now seem so crowded with people.
Yeah.
But almost everywhere you went, and I know you went to some extreme places, but even in the heart of Nova Scotia, which is Halifax, you know, it didn't seem like a place where you'd have to wait all evening to try and park a car or get a hotel reservation or get a restaurant reservation, which is what you have to do in a lot of places. That was the impression I got. And was that the reality?
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
yeah, it was actually.
I mean, we went down, like Cathie said, down to the harbour area, and there were a few crowds there, but not like you would get on Brighton Beach or anything like that.
No.
Everybody was so polite there as well, weren't they? You know, they would take their turns, and I think it's a relaxed way of life there as well. But it wasn't a stressful place at all, was it?
No, you didn't have that sort of feeling of stress. You know, at some UK cities, you just walk through and you've got that kind of undertone of stress.
An undertone of anxiety, yeah.
And we didn't really get any of that,
no,
did we?
No.
I think we had enough stress between the two of us, but but we didn't feel that in the places we visited.
It was definitely a relaxed atmosphere, wasn't it?
It was far more relaxed, even when the weather wasn't good. So not just in Halifax, where we were very lucky with the weather. You know, even in places where it was raining, there still wasn't that stress. Everybody's got to get somewhere feeling. And
Halifax being quite a big town. Quite a big, is it a town?
Town, city.
Yeah,
city,
yeah. It wasn't overcrowded, you know. Some towns you can just feel like everybody's on top of you, but it really wasn't, was it?
No.
I mean, we walked through the town centre trying to get a lift, and it was just like random person here and there, wasn't it?
Yeah, but nobody kind of looked at you funny, like, what on earth are you doing? You know, everybody, they sort of took you at face value, and if they could help you, they did, and if they couldn't.
It definitely gives an impression of a very inclusive society. You know, they don't, nobody really cares who you are, what you are, but they're going to look after you. One of the things was that that I noticed was that at the very end, when you realised you'd won, and you're obviously very chuffed about that, but you did say that, you know, it doesn't matter really how old you are, you know, what sex you are, what colour skin you are, what sexuality you are, you know, you can have a good time. And for me, that resonates, being a top end of middle age, that, you know, if you're fit enough and you've got energy enough, then you can enjoy all these sorts of exciting adventures, really.
Oh, 100%, yes. I mean, you know, we've always said that right the way through, haven't we? That it doesn't matter, well, whatever scenario, there's nothing to stop people from doing this. Canada is a good place to start with sort of more exploring holidays, because it's a safe place. It's got the diversity of geography, of community. There's so many different things to see in that one country. And because the people are so lovely and they're very generous and they're non-judgmental, you don't feel stress, you don't feel anxious about being there. And I think, yes, if people are looking to travel for the first time and they're not sure, Canada is a brilliant place to start.
I'd say you don't have to be extraordinarily fit to do what we did anyway.
I think to do the race, you need an element of fitness. But
if you want to go and explore places like Nova Scotia, is not the biggest place in the world, but it's big enough to explore. You can do it via coach, you can hire a car, you can do it via thumbing a, well, we can't thumb a lift, but getting car shares and stuff. But you don't have to be always fit and run rounds and stuff like that. You know, there's things there, like, I mean, like you said, we kayaked, and it wasn't strenuous. We just had a nice little kayak. There was some people doing all sorts of random stuff on the water, but there were people just plodding along down the seafront. So you can be as active as you want to be, but not be active as well. So you don't have to be fit to explore, to be fair.
Very, very, very good. Now, temporarily, you've dropped your rucksacks that looks bloody enormous, quite frankly, on the back of you.
Yeah.
Bigger than her.
I couldn't lift it the first couple of weeks. Trish had to lift it onto me.
Yeah, and I noticed that you made a bit of a schoolgirl error at the end, and by not dumping them earlier, and running
We
up
even
to the
talked about that
lighthouse.
the night before. The night before, we said, right, we're going to drop our bags.
At the last thing on the Garmin, we'll drop our bags and we'll run, and then we still run up.
We still went up the steps
Yeah.
with them.
But having dropped them temporarily until your next adventure,
Yes.
what have you been doing since, and what will you be doing now? I know, for example, Trish, you've been doing some work with the RNIB. How's that going?
I'm absolutely loving it. So I did work for a bank. We got back from Canada. I realised that where I was fairly exclusive of my eyesight. So, you know, it was a can't do situation rather than a can do. And then I started speaking with the guys at RNIB, and I'm now Community Connections Coordinator for them, and work all over Devon and Cornwall, Somerset, Wiltshire, helping people with their eyesight journeys. Yeah, and I'm absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. And I don't get told you can't do that anymore. It's like, can you do that? I'm like, oh, give it a go.
Yeah,
excellent.
Massive positive change.
Yeah, massive positive change.
And Cathie, you've gone back to your pharmacy,
Yes.
pharmaceutical job.
Yeah, so Gareth, my husband, and I, we run 2 community pharmacies. So we're busy doing that. Nothing's really changed since COVID. We thought it might sort of go back to normal, but nothing's gone back to normal. So, but yes, I mean, you know, it's what we do. But we've done some travelling though, haven't we?
And she's buying a new house as well.
Oh yes, yeah. We're in the process
with
of
my room. Spare room for me.
of buying a new house. But the travel-wise, when we came back from Canada in the September, we flew out to Peru and we trekked the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu
with your husband,
with Gareth. He came on that one. Yeah. And then in October, just a few weeks now,
yes,
we are flying out to China and we're trekking on the Great Wall.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Well, you said things haven't returned to normal. Things don't sound as if they're ever normal with you two.
Nothing. There's nothing normal about us.
So never normal, which is great. Which is it's such a refreshing change. And I just want to thank you so much for spending the time with me this afternoon. And best of luck on the Great Wall of China. It can be a bit slippy on it, I'll be honest with you. So be careful with that.
Noted.
But yeah,
thank you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, really nice to meet you.
Well, that was fantastic from Tricia and Cathie, and I'm sure you're all entertained by that. But let's get a little bit more detail. Let's get a little bit more actual facts about Nova Scotia. And I couldn't think of anybody better than one of the head honchos at Tourism Nova Scotia. And she's waiting on the other end of the line with bated breath. She wants to tell us all there is to know about Nova Scotia. And that's Patricia Pardy. Good afternoon, Patricia. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Graham. I'm doing well over here in sunny Nova Scotia here today. And thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Yes, Good. It was so great to see the interview with Cathie and Tricia. It's just amazing, and I wish I had seen the race myself, but I'm hoping to be able to catch some of it the full show, because of course we're here in Nova Scotia and it was publicized in the UK, but hopefully soon I'll be able to get to see more of that show. But I've heard amazing results from it, and the feedback that people have been showing us from the race around the world has been so outstanding. It's awesome.
That's fantastic. During my chat with Tricia and Cathie, they spoke a little bit about kayaking in Halifax. They spoke about the monuments and the very tasteful memorials to the people from the Titanic. They also spoke almost in unblurred words about the gin factory. What else can one do around Halifax and around Nova Scotia? You know, perhaps you can give me a bit more, or give indeed our listeners a bit more detail about what one could do.
Oh, not a problem at all. There's so much to see and do. I'm probably not going to capture it all in this interview today, but in terms of Halifax, there is so much to see and do. We are, of course, the capital city of Nova Scotia and also the hub of really Atlantic Canada. And we are a port city. So actually, after Sydney, Australia, we have the second largest ice-free harbor in the world, but there's so much to do around this port city of Halifax. We have, in terms of a lovely 4-kilometer, just over 2 miles boardwalk that you can walk along. There's lots of harbor activity with boat tours happening, kayaking, sea-doos, in terms of smaller boats, larger boats, all different kinds. We also have, you can bike along the waterfront, you can walk along the waterfront, there's hammocks there, you can just relax and enjoy the ocean view and take in the hustle and bustle. The nice thing about our boardwalk, though, it's not overly crowded, and I think they also mentioned that as well. It's not an overly crowded city, and it's very walkable and just lots of space to walk around. There's shops, restaurants. We have Pier 21, so the Canadian Museum of Immigration at Pier 21 is where people can come and learn about their ancestors that may have immigrated over to Canada. That would have been their first stopping point into Halifax. So that pier, you can actually go and research your ancestors and see if any of them came over through Pier 21. As well, we have the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic, which provides the artifacts that were found, some from the Titanic, such as the deck chair, and there's some other dishes and things like that you can actually experience and see. And they talk about the rescue efforts. Well, I shouldn't say the rescue, but rescue efforts, as well as the recovery of the bodies and that as well from the Titanic. So you can see that. There's also lots of pubs there, great with, in terms of music, food to eat in all of our restaurants, and so much in terms of seafood, but lots of other different kinds, from Italian to almost every different kind of culinary that you can take. But definitely the seafood is our highlight of what you would want to try here in Nova Scotia. And with just some lovely parks as well, public gardens. We have a beautiful Victoria garden here, modeled after what you would find more over in the UK. And as well as Point Pleasant Park. It's a beautiful walking trails along the right at the very end of the south end of Halifax. And that's another beautiful park. And you can take even the ferry over to Dartmouth and get a great view of the Halifax Harbor and see some other little shops and places right over across the ferry, which just costs you a couple dollars to go over to the ferry, just to Dartmouth.
Marvelous. Someone mentioned that you have nice beaches there, which is something I wouldn't necessarily associate with that part of the world.
That's true. We do have some fabulous beaches. We actually have beaches pretty much all around Nova Scotia, from one end, the western end, right up to the eastern end of Cape Breton Island. The beaches here, what I love about our beaches is we have some sandy beaches that really almost rival, when you see the pictures, they look like something down in the tropics. And like Carter's Beach and others down in the very south shore, right up through Cape Breton into Ingonish. We have sandy beaches. Some have different types of sand. Some of our sand is even what you would find down in the Caribbean, very fine white sand. And one thing I love about these beaches is that they're very much not crowded. So you can really stretch out, enjoy the beach without having to be right on top of your neighbor next door to you. And even in the Northumberland side, which is what runs between Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, there's a strait there, and those waters are actually fabulous for swimming. And the waters are warmer as what you would find in the North Carolinas down in the States. So in terms of it's great, fabulous water for kayaking, for boating, for just enjoying surfing. And in Lawrencetown, one other beach, we have some great surfing as well. So that's a fabulous area on the eastern shore to go do kite surfing or just plain surfing. And there's a surfing school there as well with all the equipment and gear.
Oh. One of the things that we've been focusing on one of the cities is the capital, Halifax, which I know from personal experience is very easy to get to from the UK. But what sort of itinerary would you suggest? Do you have a favourite itinerary for people that are visiting Nova Scotia?
I have two favorite itineraries, if that's okay. Because I really struggle with either one of them. One of my favorites is what I call our hub and spoke itinerary, which is about 4 or 5 days. So you would land into Nova Scotia. into Halifax, and which, of course, with a direct flight of only 6 hours from London Heathrow directly into Halifax, you come straight over with Air Canada. And when you're in there, you could spend about 2 nights at least in Halifax itself, right in the downtown, which is very walkable. You don't even need a car for those first 2 days if you don't want to rent a car. And then afterwards, you can either get transportation through hired buses that will take you around, but also there's you can do what's called a hub and spoke. So you could make Halifax your actual destination, and you could take a winery tour out into the valley, into Wolfville and Annapolis Valley area, and visit some of our wineries, which we have. In Nova Scotia in itself, we have over 20 wineries here in the province, of which most of them are in the Wolfville area. And then you can also come back to Halifax that evening. It's just under an hour trip, and then go down to the southern shore and visit Peggy's Cove and visit Peggy's Cove, visit the lighthouse and walk on the granite rocks. And then also travel on towards like Hubbard's, Chester, to a final destination of Lunenburg, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Have dinner or lunch at Lunenburg, tour around, take in the shops and the beautiful coastal scenery there as well. Visit possibly the Blue Nose, which is our sailing schooner, found on our 10-cent piece, our Canadian dime. And then you could head right back to Halifax. So that's one of my favorites. Is kind of like a hub and spoke, and it does like a central part of Nova Scotia. But my other second favorite is about a 10 to 14 day trip to go all along the coastline. We have 8,000 miles of beautiful coastline here, and you could take that from Halifax and then go right around the eastern shore, visit our beautiful sandy beaches and the wildlife and the 100 Islands area. Go up along Cape Breton to visit our national park and also do some great hiking. There's whale watching up there as well. Some great coastal scenery, and then come back down around into the Northumberland area, visit our sandy beaches, visit our historic wildlife, and one of our gin institutes is up there actually in the Northumberland area as well. Come along the top, and you can go into visit our in around Joggins and Advocate Harbor, and you can actually learn about dinosaurs and all of our history and see some fossils. Come along then to Wolfville and go to see our wineries and our agricultural farms. Head down then towards Digby. You can visit and see some fabulous whale watching there, which we have over 12 different species of whales that visit our Bay of Fundy. In that area, you could do some tidal bore rafting in this area as well, up in the Bay of Fundy. Then go along the coastline towards Yarmouth. Again, some beautiful sandy beaches. Go to Cape Forshue, see one of the really unique lighthouses, of which we have over 150 lighthouses that dot our coastline in here in Nova Scotia. Come back along the southern shore to have some fabulous lobster, again, some great sandy beaches, some beautiful coastal scenery, kayaking, and then head back towards Halifax. So you kind of just do the whole perimeter of Nova Scotia in about 10 to 14 days.
Sounds absolutely fabulous, I must admit. Finally, and thank you for your time, Patricia. I understand that there is a competition for people that have registered to listen to this webinar. Do you have details of that? I understand it's with Air Canada.
I do actually. Afterwards, we'll send an email where you can register for this, for our contest promotion, where you can win a trip for 2 people to come over to Nova Scotia. In terms of it's 2 people for 4 nights, accommodations will be taken care of, as well as an attraction pass and your flights, of course. So it's London to Halifax direct. And the only 2 stipulations is you would complete the Air Canada training and then also complete the Nova Scotia online training. So once you complete those 2 training programs and finish those programs, you are in to win for that trip, which will happen. It could happen even this year. The contest closed the end of November, but most likely I think some people will probably take that trip into next year, into 2024.
Sounds fantastic. So Air Canada training, Nova Scotia training. You've already registered for this webinar, you're in.
That's right. Just complete the training and you're in for the chance to win.
Lovely. Tricia, thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you in Nova Scotia before too long.
Love to see you. Anytime you're welcome, Graham. Just let me know. Thanks everybody for joining in today too. Really appreciate it.
Bye. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you found all of that information from Patricia about Tourism Nova Scotia very, very interesting. But the one burning question really is, how do I book any of this? If any of my clients, any of my friends, any of my relations really have taken the Nova Scotia bug, how do I book it? Well, there is only one answer, really. There are lots of tour operators, but there's only one Canadian affair. And I am delighted on the other end of this line now to have Stephanie from Canadian Affair. Good afternoon, good morning, Stephanie.
Hi there, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Very good. Stephanie, for those that don't know, and I don't believe there's any travel agent in the entire United Kingdom that wouldn't know Canadian Affair, but perhaps you can just give us a brief overview of Canadian Affair and a little bit about what you do in Nova Scotia.
Okay, well, Canadian Affair have been going for over 28 years. So we are the specialists basically for Canada. All our reservations team go out very frequently, and the sales team looking after all the travel agents go out regularly as well. But in terms of Nova Scotia, we have an extensive selection of itineraries that cover Nova Scotia. And whether it specialises on the eastern Nova Scotia or the western coastline or the whole of Nova Scotia, we have a selection. So the main way of going there is by road. So we do different car elements to it or motorhomes. And we can give guidance on that, whether it's better to go on that particular route by car or whether going out in the wide open spaces, it's better to use the motorhomes. But again, our team can give all that advice to any of the travel agents, and we can help with whatever clients want to do. In addition to that, we are holding, in conjunction with this webinar, we are holding an incentive for the agents, and that will run right up until the 14th of October. Now, it runs in conjunction with our usual incentives that most of the agents are aware of. So currently, any bookings that are between £2,500 and £5,000, they will earn £25 to shop vouchers. 5,000 to just below 10k is 50. So 10k and above is £100 love to shop. So in addition to that, any Nova Scotia bookings that are made, and they include a minimum of 3 nights in Nova Scotia, and to be fair, you're not going to do any less than 3 nights in Nova Scotia, they'll add an extra £50 to the Love to Shop vouchers. But I think the important thing to take away on this is have a look at our website. The agents will know all about that, and all the extensive itineraries are on there for them to choose between and go through with the clients. There's maps on there, there's ideas on there, and also have a look at our Facebook pages, Canadian Affair agents on Facebook. And it's just a case of making sure that we get it right for the client. So anything that you see on the website, although we've put those packages together, they are all flexible. And we always make sure that the agents explain to the clients, we will tailor make it to fit that individual client. So we are very, very flexible. We cover all budgets as well. So we make sure that we fit in line with that. But yeah, it's really about talking to our reservation team and looking on our website and Facebook pages.
That sounds absolutely fantastic, Stephanie. Yeah, well done on that. I mean, there's so many incentives now for agents to sell holidays to Nova Scotia through Canadian Affair. One of the bigger incentives, of course, is having a satisfied client. And by the sound of it, with your experienced reservation staff that know the country inside out, that's almost a guarantee. So, you know, for them to sell a holiday in which they're going to have satisfied clients is another big incentive for repeat business. So that's fantastic. And thank you very much for coming on this afternoon and telling me all about it.
No, thank you for letting us do that.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
And ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you agree that all of the information we've heard on this webinar has been of extreme interest. Nova Scotia seems absolutely a fantastic place to go. We've heard from Tricia and Cathie about when they went through on their race across the world. We've heard from Patricia from Tourism Nova Scotia. And we've just heard from Stephanie from Canadian Affair that gives every incentive possible for you as a travel agent to sell a holiday to Nova Scotia. And as I mentioned there, having a satisfied customer must be at the top of your priorities as well, because that means that they're more likely to come back to you for your business. Lots of information on the web, obviously, about Tourism Nova Scotia, Canadian Affair, Tourism Nova Scotia. And even on our own website, travelmold.com, we have a partner zone for Tourism Nova Scotia. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you soon.